All right, guys, here we go. This is Algebra 2, Chapter 12, Section 9. This deals with inverse trig functions. So what we want to be able to do is find values and solve equations by using inverse trig functions. Basically, what we're going to try to do is find principal values, which means these are angles, okay? But they are very well defined. They are very specific. And for if you want to find an angle that has a cosine, a principal value cosine, it's going to be a capital letter C. So principal value cosine, capital letter C here is represented by that. So basically what you're doing is you're looking for the angle, there's only one now, the angle that has a cosine of the given value. And so for cosine, you're going to be giving answers that are in quadrant 1 and 2 only. For sine and tangent, principal value sine and tangent, again, we're going to use capital letters to denote principal value of sine and principal value of tangent. And so these two are in quadrant 1 and 4 only. Okay, so cosine's the different one. It's in quadrant 1 and 2. You're going to give answers in quadrant 1 and 2 only for cosine. For sine and tangent, your answers will be either quadrant 1 or 4. That's it. If your answers are in different quadrants, those ones you throw away. So we'll do some examples to get you going, okay? So let's do a couple here. So our first example is principal value. See the capital letter S? That means principal value inverse of radical 3 over 2. Okay? So here's what it's asking. Okay? What it's asking is basically when you see this, it says what angle in quadrant, let's see, 1 or 4 has a sine of radical 3 over 2. Okay, so we're only looking for quadrant 1 or 4 for principal value inverse of sine. Okay, we're looking for what angle has a sine value of radical 3 over 2. So we're going to draw this out. So if you think about it, I'm going to draw this out. Remember now, sine, if you remember, is y over r. Okay, so this says radical 3 over 2. So that means y equals radical 3. R equals 2, right? So if you remember Pythagorean theorem, x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Okay, we don't know x, so we're going to leave that alone. Y squared, radical 3 squared equals r, which is 2 squared. So x squared plus radical 3 times itself, radical 3 squared is 3, equals 4. So you bring that over, x equals, now normally, it's a plus or minus 1, okay? So x squared is 1, so that means x equals 1 or negative 1, okay? When we take the square root, we get x equals 1 or negative 1. Now, think about this, okay? We're either in quadrant 1 or in quadrant 4, okay? If you're in quadrant 1 or 4, is x going to be positive or negative? Doesn't matter which quadrant, right? Look, think about it. Quadrant 1 or 4? Quadrant 1 or 4? If you're in quadrant 1, is x positive or negative? Positive. If you're in quadrant 4, is x positive or negative? Positive, okay? So this guy, negative, we throw away. Okay, so now we have our three numbers. X equals 1, y equals radical 3, r equals 2, and then we're going to draw that out. Okay, so x is 1, so I'm starting from the origin. I go 1 to the right. Okay, 1 to the right. Y is radical 3, so I'm going to go up, radical 3. So here's 1 for x, radical 3 for y, and remember r, you go back to the origin. So r is 2. Okay, so now what angle is this guy over here? What angle is always across from radical 3. Remember your 30, 60, 90 triangle? Across from 30 is always 60 degrees. So that's going to be your answer. Okay, so the principal value of sine inverse of radical 3 over 2 is going to be 60 degrees only. Now, in the past, when it wasn't principal value, if it was a lowercase like this, lowercase inverse radical 3 over 2, okay, when it give you like this, where it's just regular inverse sine, there was actually two answers, okay? There were two answers that has a y of radical 3 and an r of 2. There was two places, okay? So for example, here I have a y of radical 3 and an r of 2. This angle is 60 degrees. But you see, there was another place right over here where y is radical 3 and r is 2. Okay, so both of these angles fit the description. Okay, both of these has a sine of radical 3 over 2. This angle is 60 degrees, while this angle here, if you remember, the reference is 60, so our angle is 120. So 120 would be an answer, okay? But if we're talking about principal value, okay, well, this guy, principal value, is only in quadrant 1 or 4. If you see angles that are not in these quadrants, you throw it away. So look at your two answers, 60 and 120, okay? 60 is in quadrant 1, and 120 is not in quadrant 1 or 4, so you throw this one away. So your true answer is only 60 degrees. Okay, so basically what principal value does is it throws away the other angle that is a copy. Okay, so 120, if you press in your calculator sine of 120, you get radical 3 over 2. If you press the sine of 60, you also get radical 3 over 2. So basically, when we find the principal value inverse, we're going backwards. We're looking for the one angle that has a sine of radical 3 over 2, and that has to be in quadrant 1 or 4. So 60 is our answer. Hopefully you understand that. Okay, let's do a couple more. Again, we're going to do principal value inverse of 1/2. Okay, you only have principal value when you're looking for an angle. Okay, so here's what it's saying. What angle in Q1 or 4 has a sine of 1/2? Okay, so that's all that is. So again, we know that sine equals y over r. So that means y equals 1, r equals 2. Again, Pythagorean theorem, x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So we just plug in what we know. X squared, we don't know. 1 squared, r squared, which is 2 squared. So x squared plus 1 equals 4. Bring that over. X squared equals 3. X equals radical 3 or negative radical 3. Okay, but remember, we're talking about principal value sine. Okay, now, what quadrant is this only allowed in? It's only allowed in quadrant 1 and 4. Okay, so these are the only two angles. Now, in quadrant 1 or 4, can you have an x of radical 3? Yes. In quadrant 1 or 4, okay, can you have an x of negative radical 3? And that's a no. So x can't be negative radical 3 here. So now we're looking for an angle that has a y of 1, an r of 2, and an x of radical 3, not negative. Okay, because negative for x, and x is negative in quadrant 2 and 3. We don't want 2 and 3. We want 1 and 4. So now we're going to draw this out. We're going to draw that out, okay? X is radical 3. So starting from origin, I'm going to go right radical 3. I'm going to go up 1. Okay, so Radical 3 to the right, up 1. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the origin. Now they want to know what's this angle right here. Okay, of course, r is 2. So what angle has 1 across from it? From a 30, 60, 90, we know that it's 30 degrees. Okay, so there you go. That's your second problem. Okay, let's keep on going. Do a couple more. Okay, so next problem, we're going to deal with principal cosine of -1/2. Okay, all right, so let's slide that up. Okay, so this says, what angle, remember we're cosine now, okay? We're dealing with cosine. So what angle in principal value cosine is only in quadrant 1 or 2? What angle in quadrant 1 or 2 has a cosine of -1/2? That's the question, okay? So let's break this down. Cosine has 2 letters, right? What are the 2 letters for cosine? If you remember, cosine is x over r, okay? X over r. So that means then x equals -1, r equals 2, okay? X is -1, r is 2. Now, let's do Pythagorean theorem, okay? X squared plus y squared equals r squared. So -1 squared plus y squared equals 2 squared. So 1 plus y squared equals 4. Bring the 1 over. Y squared equals 3. That means y equals 3 radical 3 or negative radical 3. Okay, so let me slide that up here. All right. So now, principal value cosine, okay, principal value cosine is going to only be available in quadrant 1 or 2. Okay, so now in quadrant 1 or 2, doesn't matter if you're talking about quadrant 1 or 2, is y equal to radical 3 or y equal to negative radical 3? Which one's possible? In quadrant 1 or 2, y will always be positive. So this is my answer. In quadrant 1, y is not negative. In quadrant 2, y is not negative. So we throw this one away. So now we have our 3 values. X equals -1, r equals 2, and y we found was radical 3. Okay, so now we're going to draw that out. Okay, let's draw that out. Draw for me an angle, okay, where x is -1. Okay, starting from the origin, if I want x to be -1, what direction do I move? If I want x to be -1, I gotta go left, okay? I'm gonna go left, -1. Y has to be radical 3. So -1 is going to the left, y is radical 3, that means I'm gonna go up. I'm gonna go up, radical 3. Radical 3 here. Okay, so x is -1, left, y is radical 3, and r, of course, goes back to the origin at 2. Now, I want to know what's this angle here. Okay, so before you answer that, you have to know what's the angle inside. That's called the reference. What angle is always across from the radical 3? So this angle inside here, right, inside there, is 60 degrees. So if you start from the right hand side and you swing it over, this angle is 120 degrees because 60 degrees is inside, and if you go straight across, it'll be 180 degrees. So you stopped at 120 because 60 more would make it 180. So your answer is 120 degrees. Remember, we're in quadrant 1 or 2, right? So 120 is in quadrant 2, so that's your answer. Okay, so let's see about tangent, okay? For example, arctan, inverse tan, principle, okay, of radical 3. Ooh, okay, so what angle in quadrant 1, okay, or 4 has a tangent that equals of radical 3? Okay, that's the question. So now, if you remember, tangent has 2 letters, right? Tangent is y over x. But it's a radical 3. But radical 3, how do you make that a fraction, right? You remember, radical 3 really is radical 3 over 1. Okay? So that tells you that y equals radical 3, x equals 1, and r is always positive, so you do Pythagorean theorem. Okay, x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Okay, so let's see, 1 squared plus radical 3 squared equals r squared. So 1 plus 3 equals r squared. This is 4 equals r squared. R can't be negative, so r has to be 2. R cannot be negative. Okay, so r equals 2. So now, looking at these 3 here, where are we? Remember, we're in quadrant. Tangent is only in quadrant 1 and 4. Okay, quadrant 1 and 4. Right there. Now, what quadrant are we in when x is positive and y is positive? Let's draw that out. X is positive. Starting from the origin, x is 1. Right here, we stopped. Going to the right. We go to the right 1 unit. We go up. We go up. Radical 3. We go right 1. We go up radical 3. R is 2. So again, look at this. What's this angle? What angle is always across from radical 3? So that answer is 60 degrees. There's my answer. Okay, so that's it. Hopefully you're okay with that. We can do some more examples. Okay, so let's see. I'll do it again for, let's say, for example, one more time, okay? Let's go with arctan, inverse tan of -1, okay? Again, what angle, okay, in Q1 or 4 has a tangent of -1, okay? So again, you remember tangent is equal to y over x. That means y and x, well, is -1. Okay, y and x must equal -1, so we're gonna make that a fraction. Now, -1 as a fraction, okay, -1 as a fraction could be -1 over 1 or 1 over -1. Now, we have to decide. The first fraction, this says y equals -1, x says 1. The second fraction, this says y equals 1, x is -1. Okay, so now, well, which one of these fits our quadrant 1 or quadrant 4? Okay, so if you look at it, in quadrant 1 or in quadrant 4, in quadrant 1 or 4, well, this one won't fit. This is not a good one right here, because look, what's wrong with this guy? X is negative. In quadrant 1, x is not negative. In quadrant 4, x is not negative. So this guy's wrong. This is the one we want. Okay? So x is 1, y is -1, because in quadrant 1, x could be positive. In quadrant 4, x could be positive. In quadrant 4, though, y is negative. Okay? So x can't be negative because quadrant 1 and 4, X can't be negative. So we're going to do Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so x squared plus y squared equals r squared. 1 squared plus negative 1 squared equals r squared. 1 plus 1 equals r squared. Now, r can't be negative, right? So make sure you remember that. R squared is radical 2. That means, sorry, r is 2. R squared is 2. R is radical 2. So r equals radical 2. We just found that. Now, we're going to draw this out. We're going to draw out x is 1. So starting in the middle, origin, we're going to go right 1. And then y is negative 1, so we're going to go down 1. 1, down 1, and r is radical 2. Okay, now, what angle is inside here? What angle on a 1, 1, radical 2 triangle is always across, right? In a 1, 1, radical 2 triangle, we're talking about 45, 45, 90 triangle. So this guy in here has to be 45 degrees. Okay, inside here is 45 degrees. But we don't want that. We want starting from the right, spin all the way over. Okay, how many degrees did you spin when you stopped right there? When you stopped on this diagonal? You needed 45 more to complete a circle. So you take 360 minus 45, and that will be your answer of 315. Okay, look at this answer. 315 is in quadrant 4, so you know that this answer fits. Okay, so there you go. All right. So let's do another one, a little bit more complicated. Okay, little next level. This one is going to say cosine, parentheses, sine inverse. See, there's a difference of negative radical 2 over 2. Okay, so first they want you to find the angle and then take the cos of that angle. Okay, so 2 steps here. 1, find the angle. Find angle where sine is negative radical 2 over 2. Okay, now make sure we're in quadrant 1 or 4, right? So we're either in quadrant 1 or 4. And then afterwards, okay, you're going to take the cosine of that angle. So that's how this works. See this guy right here. Earlier, we just found the angle. But now, after we're done with finding angle, we want to find the cosine of it. Okay, so let's think about that a little bit. Let's start with the inside here. Sine, if you remember, is y over r. Okay, so that means, well, negative radical 2 over 2. Okay, but this has been simplified. We don't see this normally, originally. Okay, so negative radical 2 over 2, once upon a time, started out as negative 1 over radical 2. Remember that? We rationalize it to get this. So that means y is negative 1. R is radical 2. Right? That's your 45 to 45, 90 triangle. Now, that means x is going to be 1 because quadrant 1 or 4 doesn't matter. Quadrant 1 or 4, x has to be positive 1. Okay, so now we're going to draw that out. Where has an x of 1, a y of negative 1, and r of radical 2? So starting from origin, I'm going to go to the right 1, and I'm going to go down negative 1. X is 1, y is negative 1, r is radical 2, sorry, radical 2. So what angle spins from the right hand side all the way to the hypotenuse and stops here? So inside here is 45 degrees. So in total, I travel 315. Okay, so now that's the inside. Now, what the problem asks you to do is find the cosine of 315 degrees. Okay, now cosine of 315, Well, you should know it using flashcards or using a calculator, but you can also draw that out. Well, here's 315, right? Here's 315. So what's the cosine of this angle? Cosine, right? Cosine, they're asking you to find the cosine. To find the cosine, you got to use the letters x and r. So, hey, they want you to know or find out what's x, what's r. So x is 1, r is radical 2. So now if you rationalize it, you get radical 2 over 2. So the answer to this problem is going to be radical 2 over 2. Okay? So originally you found 315, and then afterwards you were supposed to find the cosine of 315. And so here's your final answer. This was a two-step process. There you go. Final answer. Okay. So hopefully you're okay with that. So let's do some more. Yeah. For example, let's say we want to find sine. Okay. Arctan principle. Okay, of 5 over 12. Okay, so here they want you to find angle, right? But in reality, whatever this angle is, they don't really care. They want the sine of that angle. Okay, so let's think about this. Okay, let's start with this guy first. Find the angle that has a tangent of 5 over 12. Now make sure you remember principal tangent is going to be in quadrant 1 and 4 only. Okay? So this means y is 5, x is 12. Now, is that quadrant 1 or 4? Has to be quadrant 1. Okay? So x squared, y squared equals r squared. So 12 squared plus 5 squared equals r squared. 144 plus 25 equals r squared. This is 169 equals r squared. What number times itself gives you 169? And r is always positive, so come up with 13. R is 13. So we found r equals 13. Okay, so if you want to, you can draw that out. No big deal. You can draw that out, okay? X starting from the origin, x is 12. So I'm going to stop here. X is 12. Y is 5. And then r is 13. Okay, so here's my angle. I could find out what the angle is, but really, they don't want that. They don't want the angle, okay? Ultimately, they want you to find the sine of this angle. So you don't have to go and find the angle itself. Just give me the sine of this angle right here. This angle right here. Okay, put yourself right here. What is the sine of this right here? Sine is what letters? Sine, if you remember, is y over r. So y equals 5. R is 13. So that's the answer to this problem. 5 over 13. Okay. Let's see here. Last one, okay? Last one right here. Last one. Sine inverse cosine of 0.3. Ooh, that doesn't look great. Okay, so they're trying to trick you with throwing in these fancy numbers, but focus on this guy right here. Okay, cos inverse, principal cos inverse is in quadrant 1 or 2. Okay, so now in quadrant 1 or 2, which one is it? Which one has a cosine of positive 0.3? Is it quadrant 1 or quadrant 2? Okay, in this case, I know we're in quadrant 1 because in quadrant 2, x, right, cosine would be negative. Okay, so I have to be in quadrant 1. Okay, so this has to be right, quadrant 1. So now cosine, if you remember, is x over r. But 0.3, make it a fraction. 0.3 in fraction form, okay, is 3 over 10. So right there, that tells you in fraction form, x is 3, r is 10. So x equals 3, r equals 10. Okay, Pythagorean theorem time. X squared plus y squared equals r squared. 3 squared plus y squared equals 10 squared. 9 plus y squared equals 100. Bring the 9 over. Y squared equals 91. Y equals square root 91. Now remember, we're in quadrant 1. So this can be a positive number or negative. In quadrant 1, y has to be positive. So this is my answer. Y, we have x is 3, r is 10. Now we found y is positive radical 91. Okay, let's draw that out real quick. Now remember, we're in quadrant 1. So I'm going to go to the right 3 units. 3. I'm going to go up. Okay, radical 91. Then r is 10. Okay, so now they don't want the it's kind of cool if you punch in the calculator and find out this angle. You could, but no big deal. What they want is the sine of this angle. What's the sine of this angle right here? Sine is y over r. So radical 91 over 10. That's your answer right there. Okay, so try a couple of these problems in the book and see how you do. All right, good luck.